Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. What if the person offering to save you might also sell you? Today, I'm pairing Chris Lee's "How I Became a North Korean," an intimate first-person triptych of survival on the China-North Korea border, with Melanie Kirkpatrick's escape from North Korea. That's a wide angle map of the underground routes, brokers, missionaries, and policies that make every step dangerous. So it's two lenses on the same situation. One makes you feel it, and the other shows you how the machine works. So hopefully, this will be a clear breakdown of what each of these books reveal and what they illuminate together. So we're going to start with How I Became a North Korean by Chris Lee. So Chris Lee is a South Korean short story writer, novelist, and translator. She debuted in 2012 with the multi-award-winning short story collection Drifting House. Which was widely praised for its empathetic and insightful exploration of subjects such as the IMF crisis, goose fathers, and North Korean defectors. And her this book we're reviewing today was her much anticipated debut novel. It was published in 2016. I'm not sure if it's been translated into Korean yet, so it was written in English. And Lee is also an accomplished translator, having brought to English two excellent novels by Kim Young-ha, I Hear Your Voice and Diary of a Murderer. And I think I've reviewed all of these things on the channel. I reviewed Chris Lee's debut collection of short stories, Drifting House, and I reviewed both of those Kim Young-ha novels, I Hear Your Voice and Diary of a Murderer. And you can also find on the channel an event. I used to do these events where Chris Lee interviewed Kim Young-ha. So you can go and watch some of those videos if you want. But anyway, upon the release of her debut novel, How I Became a North Korean, it was very, quite widely praised, and it was praised for its empathy, precision, insight, and heart. And the story follows three very different characters connected to North Korea, whose paths converge in the border region with China. And Pulitzer Prize winning novelist Adam Johnson, who also wrote a novel about North Korea, commented that Chris Lee takes us into urgent and emotional novelistic terrain, the desperate and tenuous realms defectors are forced to inhabit after escaping North Korea. So, who are these three characters and how do their journeys begin? Sorry, it's still super hot here. Okay, so one of the novel's greatest strengths is its three vividly drawn and believable characters. So each is given a distinct voice through alternating first person chapters. So we first meet Yongju. Yongju is the son of a high ranking North Korean party member who enjoys a life of comfort. Until his father is executed by the dear leader for secretly holding foreign currency. Using her connections, Yongju's mother manages to smuggle them across the border, where he's confronted with a harsh reality far removed from the luxury of Pyongyang. Next is Danny, a deeply devout Korean American teenager who faces vicious bullying at school for both his sexuality and his religious beliefs. After a suicide attempt, he moves to the Chinese side of the North Korean border to escape the pressures of his American high school life. Finally, we meet Jangmi, a pregnant young woman from an impoverished rural area of North Korea, fleeing across the border out of fear that her party member lover would kill her child if he discovers her pregnancy. So these three very different characters converge on the Chinese border, each facing very perilous circumstances with no clear path forward, their stories weaving together into a quite gripping exploration of survival, identity, and displacement. So, what kind of challenges do they encounter in this region, and how do they survive? So, the main challenge facing the characters in How I Became a North Korean is their constant vulnerability to exploitation. So at any moment, anyone around them could expose Yongju or Changmi as North Korean, triggering forcible return and the persecution that would follow. Yongju is forcibly separated from his mother and sister and left to survive in the harsh countryside. Changmi initially sells herself into a marriage on the Chinese side of the border, concealing her pregnancy. But when it's discovered, she's cast out and eventually subjected to online exploitation. Danny, meanwhile, is fleeing both personal confusion and family pressures, but after losing his passport, he finds himself in a similar situation to Yongju, living rough among other runaways. And Lee uses these experiences to highlight the character's exposure to predators and their limited ability to resist, reserving particular scorn for the missionaries who claim to help refugees but often exploit them instead. So, what is Lee's style as a writer? So, her writing has a haunting quality at times. There's a lingering emotional resonance that stays with you, and she creates a very deep emotional texture in the inner lives of these characters. She conveys their struggles and their vulnerabilities with subtlety and authenticity. And the subject matter is often brutal and tragic, but this pain resonates naturally without melodrama or exaggeration. And the result is a narrative that is powerful, moving, and at times quite beautiful. So we've been inside the story of Yongju, Changmi, and Danny. So where fear and loyalty and makeshift kinship drive every choice. But let's zoom out from the cramped rooms and whispered plans to border crossings, safe houses, and the geopolitical rules that decide who gets sent back. So if Lee was giving us heartbeat, Kirkpatrick gives us the blueprint. So let's move on to Escape from North Korea by Melanie Kirkpatrick. So, this is one of the most comprehensive books. I mean, it's over a decade old now, but at the time, it was one of the most comprehensive books on the defector, the North Korean defector experience, and one that reveals the hidden escape routes and the people who risk their lives to help refugees. So, one of the most harrowing aspects of North Korean escape stories is the dangerous journey through China. And so, what Melanie Kirkpatrick does in Escape from North Korea is she examines the underground railroad that helps defectors find freedom. So let's take a closer look. So Kirkpatrick is a former deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal, and this is a powerful and meticulously researched book. The full title is "Escape from North Korea: The Untold Story of Asia's Underground Railroad," and it's about the desperate plight of North Korean refugees who attempt to escape their homeland by crossing the border into China. Kirkpatrick describes the arduous and often hazardous route these refugees must take to cross China to reach freedom in South Korea or elsewhere. And this new underground railroad starts at the North Korean border. And takes several routes through China to various third countries, including Myanmar, Mongolia, and often ultimately South Korea. It comprises a loose network of Christian missionaries, humanitarian aid workers, people traffickers, and dubious brokers who will help, but for often exorbitant fees. The North Koreans who travel the Underground Railroad are fleeing a different kind of slavery. They're escaping from the world's most unbending totalitarian political system. Kim Jong un's North Korea is, like his father and grandfathers before him, essentially or arguably a modern day slave state in which fundamental human rights, such as the freedoms of speech, movement, and religion, are almost entirely denied. Several well known escapees have successfully traveled the Underground Railroad. They include Shin Dong Hyuk, a young man who was born inside one of North Korea's notorious political prison camps, who escaped to South Korea despite having almost no knowledge of the outside world. Shin Dong-hyuk's inhumane upbringing was detailed in Blaine Hardin's book Escape from Camp 14. There are also South Korean prisoners of war like Yu Yong Bok, who made the journey and who recounted his story in an autobiography entitled Tears of Blood. Mr. Yu had been a prisoner of war for 50 years before, at 70 years of age, he crossed the Tumen River in a small boat to begin his journey on the railroad. He too eventually found safety in South Korea. However, there are many other men, women, and children whose stories are less celebrated and who also make the journey in search of food, freedom, and happiness. Joseph Kim was a teenager who chose the auspicious date of Kim Jong il's birthday to escape by desperately running to the Tumen River and wading across. All his family members had either died of starvation or disappeared without a trace. His escape was motivated by hunger. He was lucky as he staggered into a small Chinese village on the other side of the river. He was told to find a church, and from there his journey on the Underground Railroad began. Whereas Joseph was motivated by hunger, Kim Chol-ung, a celebrated concert pianist in his homeland, was motivated by a desire to play music. The regime had forbidden him from playing jazz music. He paid a broker to take him to China and worked there for a year in several menial jobs. He was eventually caught trying to use a forged South Korean passport to leave the country and put in a Chinese jail. As the Chinese authorities were transporting him back to North Korea, he escaped by leaping from a moving train, and eventually he too made it to South Korea. Many are not so lucky. Kirkpatrick highlights the vulnerability and exploitation that North Korean women in particular often experience. Some brokers prey on and manipulate female refugees into prostitution or forced marriages with Chinese farmers by threatening to turn them over to the authorities. These women, even those who marry Chinese farmers, have no rights in the eyes of Chinese law and are often given to the authorities if they fail to satisfy their husbands or handlers. The plight of children conceived from these forced marriages is also terrible. The so-called half and half children that result from such unions are often refused citizenship, denied an education, deprived of medical support, and regularly abandoned or separated from mothers who are repatriated to North Korea. Some of the most awful stories contained in the book concern the punishment suffered by North Korean women who are repatriated to North Korea and discovered to be pregnant by Chinese men. Most are given violent forced abortions. Kirkpatrick describes one story of a heavily pregnant woman who was forced to run in a circle until she collapsed and had a miscarriage. The conductors who help refugees along the Underground Railroad, be they Christian missionaries, unscrupulous brokers, or humanitarian aid workers, also risk their well-being, even in some cases their lives, and likely face imprisonment if Chinese police or North Korean agents catch them. The road is dangerous for everyone involved. So, despite these dangers, around 20,000 have made the journey in the 10 years leading up to the book's publication. There's no way of knowing how many North Koreans remain in China, either too scared to take their chances on the railroad or simply unaware of its existence. Much scorn is directed at the policies of the Chinese, American, and South Korean governments towards the North Korean refugees. Most of Kirkpatrick's anger is directed at the Chinese policies that made the railroad so dangerous for prospective passengers. She strongly criticizes the Chinese government's much condemned policy of not recognizing North Koreans as political refugees and their policy of forced repatriation. Further criticism is leveled at the Chinese authorities who enable the trafficking of female refugees who are often powerless to resist brokers and traders. Fears are mounting, or around the time the book was published, people were worried that Kim Jong-un had made efforts to stem the tide of escapees by issuing shoot-to-kill orders to the guards along the Tumen River. And there's been a significant decline in the number of refugees in the following years. And this prompted, obviously, concerns from the humanitarian groups in the region. And as such, at the time, Melanie Kirkpatrick's book was an important book that was shining a light on these egregious human rights violations that are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. And if you read these books together, so Krys Lee's How I Became a North Korean and Melanie Kirkpatrick's Escape from North Korea, they're both sort of mapping the same dangerous terrain, but kind of from opposite directions, right? So one's from the inside out and the other's from the outside in. So Lee's novel stays close to the bone. We have these three first-person narrators, Yongju, Jangmi, and Danny. They carry us through the borderlands around the region, exposing this sort of constant threat of exposure, of repatriation, trafficking, predation. And the book is notably skeptical of self-styled helpers, especially certain missionaries, and foregrounds the mental cost of survival. And so this is an interior and character-driven lens. In contrast, Kirkpatrick's reportage assembles the bigger macro picture. So the clandestine routes across China and then onward to places like Mongolia or Southeast Asia somewhere. This mixed cast of conductors that includes both brokers and Christian networks, and then the policy structures, especially China's non-recognition and forced repatriation regime that make these journeys hazardous. And her work also details the patterns of exploitation that particularly ensnare women, including the forced marriages and trafficking, and then surveys the lesser-told refugee channels such as aging prisoner of wars and contract laborers. What each book illuminates is in the other is this gap between the system and the self. So Kirkpatrick gives this tragic and inevitable rather than exceptional, and Lee in turn supplies this sort of granular interiority, the fear, the shame, the fierce loyalty, the kinship that can vanish or goes unseen in policy analysis. And this complicates this sort of portrait of missionaries and brokers by showing care and coercion, right, at the sort of ground level. But taken together, they offer this sort of complementary double vision. Kirkpatrick helps you understand the machinery of escape, and Lee makes you feel the human cost. Anyway, I don't follow particularly closely, or haven't been in the past few years, what's happening on the border in North Korea. But as I was editing this script, I sort of did a quick survey of some of the news stories over the past few years, and so since around the Kirkpatrick's Escape from North Korea was published 2012, and the Krys Lee book was published 2016. And since about 2016, um, obviously, the sort of slow but steady trickle of escapees. It sort of went down to a near shutdown essentially during COVID-19. So Pyongyang obviously sealed its borders. And the crossings just collapsed, at least as far that's what people seem to believe. And slowly, as in the years after the pandemic, it seems like some limited movement resumed, but then China restarted the forced repatriations. These underground routes through through China became even more dangerous again, especially for women still. And then the number of people number of North Koreans eventually making it to South Korea is still significantly below the pre-COVID levels. And it seems like North Korea has significantly tighter border controls these days, and Beijing still refuses to treat the escapees as refugees. So the risks are still high. And anyway, as far as I can tell, these days, right now, sort of human rights groups are, focused on sort of campaigning against the sort of Chinese repatriation. They're kind of focusing on the female escapees. And yeah, so that seems to be the general situation at the moment. But like I said, I'm not a North Korea watcher or expert. Anyway, if you're new to these books, please let me know if you feel like reading them after listening to this review, or if you have read them, just let me know what you thought of them, or if you've got any up to date information, please feel free to leave a comment. And if this helped you pick your next read, please like the video, subscribe for more reviews, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. And as always, thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.